So I haven't been on YouTube for quite some time, but about 2 weeks ago, I received a comment from the user Nicola Young. And in her comment, Nicola asked me to provide some feedback on an upload that she'd placed on YouTube, which she felt refuted an argument that I had in turn presented while analyzing Judith Jarvis Thomson's Violinist thought experiment. And so I'm going to take a break from some of my other projects in an attempt to provide this feedback, because ultimately this channel is about this kind of dialogue. But there's a problem. Nicola, you didn't actually tell me which video I'm supposed to be responding to, so I've kind of taken a shot in the dark. I looked at your channel and I selected the video which seems to relate most fully and directly to the upload where you left your comment. And that's the video in which you address the responsibility objection to a violinist reasoning. Now, with that being said, I want to point out that while I do think the responsibility objection is valid, while it is closely related to my argument, it's not quite the same as the case that I presented in my upload. The responsibility objection holds that because the mother is responsible for the situation, she has an affirmative obligation to actively engage in a course of behavior which facilitates the life of the dependent that she created through the use of her body in some form or fashion. So it holds that because of X, the mother must do Y. And while I think this is completely valid, that's not the case that I presented. And don't get me wrong, it is a strong argument. It is because of the responsibility objection that you can force me to pay child support for my son, but not for my brother's son. These children are both equally dependent, they're both identical, and I may even be better suited to provide for a child than my brother. But you still can't make me pay for his child, whereas you can make me pay for my child. Why? Well, because in one case, I've created a duty to act, whereas in the other case, I've done no such thing. In one instance, the dependent only exists because of my decision, whereas in the other case, the dependent exists completely independent of anything I did or could have done. So we do see that the responsibility argument holds some sway here. And you might say, hang on. Bodily autonomy is much more important than financial freedom. Personal sovereignty is not the same thing as the freedom to do what you want with your own money. Well, if you're rich, that might be true. But for most of us, that's not the case. For most of us, bodily autonomy and financial freedom are essentially, pragmatically, the same thing. Because most of us have to work for our money. So if you told me that I had to start making child support payments, well, I'd have to go and I'd have to engage in some kind of labor which uses my body to generate that income for the sustenance of this child. It's a bit less direct, but in the end, the effect is the same. You are telling me that I must sacrifice my bodily autonomy, that I must sacrifice my personal sovereignty, that I must use my body for the sustenance of another individual. So I do think that the responsibility argument is completely valid. But pushing that aside, ignoring that for the moment, it's still not the case that I presented in my upload. Again, the responsibility objection holds that because of X, the mother must do Y. So it's arguing in favor of an affirmative obligation to actively engage in a specific course of behavior. My case, on the other hand, isn't saying that the mother must do A, it's saying that she cannot do B. And this isn't because she's been stripped of her right to bodily autonomy, it's because she's created a situation such that in order to exercise this right, she must violate somebody else's right. And you don't get to violate other people's rights even if you feel like you've got a really, really, really good reason for doing so. No matter how good your motivation is, you simply don't have the jurisdiction to violate somebody else's right in order to realize a personal goal. So if the mother's personal goal is to realize bodily autonomy, and the means to achieving this goal is violating the right of her unborn child, she doesn't get to do so. Again, let's go back to my original thought experiment. You've accidentally poisoned this violinist. He's laying on the floor, but nobody knows about it. If anybody discovers this, you'll be ruined. You're a chef, so if people find out that you poisoned a customer, you'll never get another job. Without a job, you won't be able to pay tuition, so you'll have to drop out of school. Your girlfriend will leave you, your parents will disown you, and socially you'll be ostracized for injuring a musical visionary. You will never work again. All of this is going to have direct negative impact on your physical health, your mental health. It's going to place a lot of stress on you. It's going to make you unhappy, and it's going to change the way that you live your life for the worse permanently. But you can escape all that. You can avoid all of these negative consequences by slitting his throat and tossing the body in the ocean before anybody can find out. You could just sweep the whole thing under the rug. but in order to do so, you must violate his right to life. The question now becomes, do you get to do so? And the answer is quite clearly a resounding no. Because even though you've got a really good reason, even though his existence is negatively impacting you in a profound and personal way, you don't have the jurisdiction to violate other people's rights. So I don't think that you've actually addressed my argument, because while it's similar to the responsibility objection, it's not quite the same. But even if it were, even if I was relying on the responsibility objection in my case against abortion, I don't think that your video provides a very strong argument against this approach to the issue. So to illustrate this, let's investigate some of the thought experiments you used to prove your point. Let's say I am in fact on this road trip, the child does run in front of my car, I hit him, and as a result, he needs a kidney transplant that only I can provide. You then ask whether or not the government has the authority to force me to give him my kidney. Well, the answer is no, but I also think that you're asking the wrong question. The government isn't forcing the woman to be pregnant. It's simply saying that if, in order to escape the pregnancy, she kills her unborn child, somebody should be held responsible for that death. So the proper question wouldn't be whether or not the government can force me to give this kid my kidney. The proper question would be whether or not the government could hold me responsible if I refused to do so, and as a result, he died. And the answer is yes. If you hit somebody, even if it's an accident, you can still be held responsible and should be held responsible for this individual's death. Now, it's not murder. There was no malicious intent. It wasn't even intentional. It was a complete accident. But the fact that it's not murder does not negate the fact that you are responsible for a lesser form of homicide, that this person did die because of you, and that you are the one who should be held responsible for that. It shouldn't be the parents. It shouldn't be the community. It shouldn't be society. It shouldn't be the taxpayer. It should be you. This is a fundamental underlying aspect of the libertarian ideology, which makes the bodily autonomy logic of Judith Jarvis Thomson's original Violinist thought experiment so powerful. It rests upon individual responsibility and personal liberty. And the same thing applies to your second thought experiment. You forget to leave a wet floor sign, I slip, a straw punctures my kidney, I'm lying on the ground and I need a transplant that only you can provide. Does the government have the authority to force you to give me your kidney? Well, no, the government doesn't. That would be tantamount to the authority to force you to be pregnant. But if I die as a result of your neglect to do so, the government can hold you responsible. And that would be a parallel for making abortion illegal. If you create a situation such that the only way to exercise your right is to violate somebody else's right, you are still responsible for violating that individual's right. The fact that you made somebody dependent upon you doesn't suddenly give you the jurisdiction to behave in any way that you want. Just because somebody needs you for their continued sustenance does not mean that you can kill them. And when you get right down to it, that's what abortion does. It's not a passive matter of refusing nutrients. No, if you could block implantation, then perhaps that could be compared to refusing nutrients. But in the typical abortion, that's not what we have. In the typical abortion, we have the use of instruments to crush cartilage, to tear flesh, to smash skulls, to break bones, to suck out brains, to dissolve tissue. This is actively taking a course of action to end somebody's life. Not the same thing as refusing care. So this is the difference between seeing somebody who's had a heart attack on the side of the road and refusing to pay CPR, and seeing somebody who's had a heart attack on the side of the road and shooting them in the head. So I hope this is a thorough and satisfactory provision of the feedback you were seeking, and I look forward to your response. Thank you.